Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining Product Tank tonight, Product Tank London. So this is the penultimate Product Tank of the year. Really excited to have you all here. So a little bit of a history lesson for those who haven't been before or need a refresher. We started 8 years ago in a basement and have since expanded to 200 cities and more than 200,000 members worldwide. Product Tank London has one more event this year, which is the Product Tank Christmas Party, focusing on what a year, what's next. Bit of a departure from our usual format. We're going to be hosting a panel event with some really great panelists, so I hope to see you all there. You can sign up once Meetup is live again. Thanks to our kind of sponsors and parent company, Mind the Product. Bit more about Mind the Product. It's the largest product community in the world and provides anything a product person should ever know to grow and develop, such as blogs, conferences, a huge Slack community, and a jobs board. You can also choose to become a member of our membership program, where you can get curated newsletters at your fingertips, more premium content, and access to virtual discussions with product leaders. Just go to mindtheproduct.com/join to join today. Turns for our agenda tonight. So we've kicked off now. Our first talk's going to be in around 10 minutes. And we have talk 2, 15 minutes after that, talk 3 at 7:40, and then a Q&A with our speakers and curator. Do you have a question for our speakers as they're going through their talks? Simply log into YouTube, click Show Chat, and then you can post your question there for our team to see and answer later on. I'm now going to hand over to Mark Abrams, who is our our curator for the day. I've been staring at my computer for far too long. Over to Mark.
Can you imagine, Sean, if I was a computer and I'd be curating at the same time? That'd be really good for the introductions. Instead, what we're going to talk about today is the non-computer side of product management, I'd almost say, talking about the soft skills that are involved in managing products, which can sometimes be the hardest, and we don't necessarily always talk about them or cover them or know how to handle some of the soft skills that we need to manage products. So I'm very excited about the 3 speakers that we've got tonight: Akil Benjamin, Ben Laplanche, and Catherine Powell. As we said, we're going to have 3 amazing talks and then Q&A afterwards. You don't have to wait till the end to come up with your questions. Just drop them in the chat, in the comment stream, as Sean said, and I'll try to keep an eye on those. So when we come to the end, after the 3 presentations, we'll start covering the questions that we've received throughout the evening. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Akil Benjamin. Akil is head of strategy and research at Cultivate, a design invention studio. He works with global brands to develop new digital products, services, and experiences. In his work at Cultivate, Akil has produced work for the likes of the BBC, Samsung, Us2, Adidas, and Mozilla. Akil is also the director of MNC Saatchi Saturday School, where he leads a development initiative helping underrepresented communities start businesses around the world. As of June 2020, the school thought its 3,000th business. And tonight with us, he'll talk about what it's like feeling like as he says, an extrovert out of tricks. Over to you, Akil, and I would really like to see a lot of virtual hands in our comment stream. Just welcome him and give him a warm Product Tank welcome.
Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I actually don't know where you are. We're on the internet and we could be everywhere. This is my talk, Extrovert Out of Tricks. But before we get started, little bit of a thing. I get really nervous and uncomfortable talking in front of people. The amount of times you may see me on screen, that might not be a thing, but I like to do a breathing exercise with everybody to kind of help me calm my nerves and help me get this done. Should only take a couple of seconds, but if you would like to join me, the way this will work is I'm going to count down from 3, 2, and 1, and then we're going to do 3 deep breaths. So Join me or not, here we go. 3, 2, 1, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, and breathe out. Okay, guys, that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much and good night. No, I'm playing with you. Okay, so I like to make new friends, and so if you like what I have to say, please feel free to introduce yourself later. My email's here, and it will feature throughout the slides, or you can connect with me on Twitter with the handles that you see below. So who am I? My name's Akil. I am as you heard from Mark, I am a community builder. I am a teacher. I am a speaker. I'm an expectant parent, which is wild, which scares me shitless, but I'm kind of looking forward to it. I think I've got a new best friend coming in January. I can't wait for that. And I'm a strategy director. But today I'm really, really, really here to tell you a story because I work at a radically purposeful design studio called Cultivate. And we're specialists in community engagement, and we exist to make sure every community is equally connected. And as you can see, maybe I have a big character and I network a lot. I love to meet people. But COVID has posed me a real big challenge because a big character in a bedroom by yourself does not go very far at all. And so this is where I became an extrovert out of trick. I'm used to being the person in a room to walk across go in a building, to meet someone and go up and meet them and sit down and ask them difficult questions and leave. I'm used to being the person to network my way around the room and meet everyone available so I can go and work out the next deal for my business. I'm used to being that person. And so without people, I feel without being in a group of people where my skills can be impacted most, I feel really not naked, but I feel really ineffective. And it showed. Like, this is what working in Corona was. Working from bed. This is our team, by the way, beautiful team. I'm working from bed. The rest of the people are working from their respective desks. I felt really ineffective, and it showed. But this is what our usual space looked like. This is what excelling looked like. This is what like making change look like. And the reason why I emphasize this so much is because one of the biggest USPs community has is our energy, is our vibe, is that thing that people really buy into, because after a while, at a certain level, a lot of people can do the job you're doing. And so it's about how do you make people feel that also makes a difference, and how do you engage people that also makes a difference, because you don't want to leave a sour taste in their mouth. And a big question for us was, how do we translate that over? We planned to adapt because of COVID, we planned to adapt our research for our research participants, but not so much our stakeholders. And where we hit friction points, it showed. We started being inconsistent. We started delivering medium value quality. Our projects were delayed. There were loss of potential earnings, and we started creating a bad rapport with our client. And that's terrible. Absolutely, positively terrible for an independent business owner to be going through these things at any given time. But now our environment put us in this position, and we thought we adapted, but we needed to be more mindful in how we adapted. The inconsistency in medium quality value is because we can never get really sharp enough or hone in on what our clients' needs were, because we weren't there as much in person anymore. The delayed projects came from starting. Well, me rubbing shoulders, networking, I used to be the person to go walk up to the senior responsible officer and introduce myself, to the CEO and introduce myself. And that used to get me greenlit all the way through a project. That's not the truth in Corona for us. People need to find out. Loss of potential earnings, well, boy, if you delayed, hell, you burning money. And bad rapport, I make friends with my clients. I'm like, we engage and connect more so and beyond the job. And so a bad rapport means our network effect is limited. It stops at that point. It doesn't continue into all the people that they know. And so being an extrovert out of trick is not just an immediate handicap for me. It's a long-term handicap because I use these skills and these skills of connecting with people and networking to navigate my way through industry to make a business. And I tell you for free, this is what it looks like. This is the reality of a bad project for a small agency. And I'll let you know even further, this is the reality of a bad project for small agencies during COVID. And so the problem, what? Maximize like times 3, 4, 5 compounded issues. What I've realized though is that with a lot of things in my life, you don't wait for the next moment to make a difference. If you really are serious about making change, you fix it now. And okay, what does that look like? Fix it now, big words, Akil, but let's be real, what does those mean practically? And so I think the next stage of this is not just outline the problem and say, okay, I struggled. I want to show you what I did to implement some simple things that I did to implement some change that really made a difference. Create a phone book. Like, we created a team phone book after a while because we're tired of waiting for emails and scheduling times and wasting 3 or 4 days trying to schedule a time to meet to address a problem we could have hashed out over the phone. And so we created a small A4 piece of paper and said, hey, in case of these reasons, we all call each other. If there's an urgent and important problem, we're just going to pick up the phone and call each other. And we're going to speak it out. And then we're going to track whatever decision in a decision log so that we can keep track of whatever decisions we made to move forward. Picking up the phone literally cuts through all of that bureaucracy, all of that scheduling, all of that mess, and you get to say, hello, this is what's up. Sometimes that's absolutely essential. Sending regular updates. We keep good documentation at Community, but I think we keeping great documentation so you can regularly update your senior responsible officer and wider stakeholders easily is essential. Like we started to get creative with it. It wasn't just about, oh, we're writing a blog post or here's a briefing. We started saying, you know what, here's a 2-minute video. We understand you may be decentralized. We understand you may want to engage with this when you need to, but here's a 2-minute video ad hoc and we give you this every week of what we've done, what we've achieved, and what we look forward to doing. And that short update has really allowed for people to really engage with us and quarterback us in decisions in and around the organization that we may not have known about. Like, our project got delayed because one of the senior responsible officers didn't know we were going out and doing user research in that particular way. They were the wider stakeholder group, so they never would have known. But now having these regular updates, these things can be sent over to them with ease, with an ease that we didn't have previously, and we wouldn't have got unless we were in the office with these people. And then doing new things to build trust, I think that's essential because you are working remotely. You are working independently. That still might not change for another 6 months, even if lockdown is lifted next week. And so how might we really build trust with a community of people that we now may never met before? We're signing contracts and I've never seen the person's face. We're shaking hands, we're doing deals and we've never shook hands. And so the money's still the same and they're paying us rates. And so this idea of creating a space where they can really trust us makes a difference. Makes a difference to the rapport. It makes a difference to how they engage with you. It makes a difference to how they communicate with you. It makes a difference, a positive one. And so when we're here now, we said, okay, can we create a shared workspace? Shared workspace was something really simple. We just said, okay, can we get on Zoom together, maybe with a client, maybe with one of the team members, and maybe just work in the same space. Have Zoom on, maybe play music in the background if you like, and just hang out, build a rapport. that brings trust, even if you're working on different things, because they can now start to engage with you as an individual, not just a transactional thing that, oh yes, we've got a scheduled meeting, we must get something done, we must get this line item out the way. I think in my whistle-stop tour of my life and some of the challenges that I might face, the lesson I've learned being an extrovert out of tricks is, hey, I'm not out of tricks yet. I would give yourself the opportunity to build relationships, even if you have to design those moments in, even if you have to engineer those moments. Spending the extra time on the phone, keeping great documentation so they can find out what you're talking about easily without having to make it up, and creating opportunities for trust and real human to human engagement, even if it's mediated through technology, I guess are my top tips to really navigating these moments. I'm actually ahead of time, which is absolutely remarkable. I'd like to say thank you for your time today, and I'd like to let you know that community is open for business, and I can let you know also that we addressed the problems that we just spoke about. We're doing pretty okay now, and so thank you very much.
Mark, you're on mute.
Thanks a lot, Akil. Sorry, it has to happen, right? What can we be if, in terms of a remote meetup, if someone is on mute? Thank you, Akil, for that really honest talk. Really enjoyed it. Took some notes of having a team phone book, doing new things to build trust. Particularly liked your point about being a bit more deliberate, designing those kind of moments to create a relationship. So thank you for that. Just for people having questions for Akil, unfortunately, he can't be there for the Q&A. It's his partner's birthday, so we're just grateful to have him in any case and for him to do his talk. But if you have specific questions, drop them in chat in the comments. We can share them with him afterwards, or maybe these are topics that Catherine and Ben and myself can pick up in any case at the Q&A later on tonight. Next up is Ben. Ben is an experienced product manager and certified coach. He thrives at the intersection of product and people and believes that fundamentally everything we do as product people is about people, with its users, customers, and our colleagues. Tonight, Ben will talk to us about how we as product managers thrive in uncertainty when it comes to our product. But when it comes to leadership, it can feel overwhelming and unclear. He will share his experiences and lessons learned so you can apply them for yourself. So without any further ado, I'd love to start seeing more hands coming in as a nice welcome for Ben. And I'm also already telling you that he doesn't have slides. So just if you think, where are the slides? I need to drop a comment to say there's no slides. Ben is just going to do top of the dome without slides. Over to you, Ben.
So hi, folks. I'm Ben. As mentioned, I'm an experienced product manager. I'm currently principal product manager at Sneak, previously in director of product at Pivotal as well. And of course, I'm a certified coach. So I'm going to talk to you today about leading yourself. And what I'm going to share is, as my experience as a product leader and insights as a coach, I want to share 4 stories with you. First one is I'm going to talk about feedback. Probably not a surprise, but I'm going to talk about the importance of hearing feedback for us as a leader. Next, I'm going to explore how that armor, kind of that coat of armor that we can sometimes wear, can lead us to being defensive and the impact that that can have on our relationships with people. Third, I'm then going to talk about judgment and how those perceptions, whether we realize we hold them or not, can impact how we show up for people. And then lastly, last but not least, number 4, I'm going to talk about us. I'm going to talk about ourselves from the perspective of self-care. So first, let me just show you a little bit more of my story and kind of what brought me here tonight. So growing up, I've always been fascinated by learning. I've always wanted to know more. I've always taken things apart, put them back together, loved to know how stuff worked. I was always clamoring to do the next thing. And I've always had really high standards for myself and always wanted to kind of push the boundaries there, both to achieve more for myself, but to kind of quench that thirst for learning as well. And that's served me really well in my life. I've been fortunate that I've worked for some really high growth roles and some really high growth companies. I've been able to be there when we've built teams, when we've launched products, opened offices, you name it. I've been able to go on that kind of roller coaster, a bit like living that startup dream that I think we often kind of think about. But what I realized was certainly over some of those roles was how hard it was, how stuck I felt a lot of the time, and this real sense of just being overwhelmed and not knowing what to do. And I realized I had imposter syndrome. But then I remember this really clearly. It was a Saturday morning. It was the 21st of October, 2017, and I woke up in floods of tears. And I didn't know what to do. That was my body telling me that I was burnt out. I was done. I was spent. Insert word here. There's just no more. I was completely broken. I wouldn't recommend it. So let me tell you about my first story. And this is about feedback. One of the things that I did when I came back from recovering from the burnout and getting stuck back into work was I started working with a coach. And I was really excited about this. It was a concept that I'd kind of heard about, but I didn't know a lot about the details or the specifics of kind of how it works. And to be honest, there was like this really logical part of my brain that was kind of hoping they'd just give me the answer. I was really expecting something like, cool, Ben, next time you need to have that difficult conversation with somebody, read this book, flick to chapter 3, there's a couple of bullet points, bit of a framework in there, follow those, you're golden. But that wasn't what I was getting. I was having these amazing sessions every couple of weeks, but I was getting feedback, I was getting observations, I was getting pushed, and I didn't want to hear all of this. I was getting really frustrated. I was like, what's going on? Like, I came to coaching to understand how I could influence and change that other person. Why aren't I getting that? And then I had this light bulb moment. It was like this real moment of clarity, and I know exactly where I was sat in that coaching session in a little meeting room in Dublin, and I had like this, oh, this is about me. The only thing that I can control here, the only thing that I can change is my perspective, my mindset. And that means I've got to be able to listen and take on board this feedback. And what I came to realize was feedback was a gift. If somebody's taken the time to think about the feedback that they want to give you, they've put a lot of care and thought into it. They're doing it because they care about you. So with that perspective shift of thinking about how you can invite this in, it really opened things up for me. Didn't mean I necessarily wanted to hear it, and it didn't make it any less uncomfortable, but I could start to see how this was a gift. So here's something I would invite you to do this week. I would like for you to speak to 3 people and ask them, how can I be a better manager? How can I be a better friend or a better partner? And you'll definitely get bonus points here if you speak to somebody outside of a work context and ask them for feedback on how you can show up better for them. So that was feedback. Let's talk about defensiveness. I remember I was sat in the office. I was actually sat in one of these kind of comfy, kind of wingback style chairs, doing a load of emails, sat on my laptop. And a colleague came up to me, and they came bounding up to me. You could feel that sense of enthusiasm and that energy. It was kind of really palpable. It was in the environment. They're like, Ben, I've got this amazing idea. Can I please talk to you about it? I was like, of course, like, let's get stuck in. Went up to the whiteboard, cleared it all off, and we started sketching away. And they had this really, really awesome idea. It was written all over their face, and you could tell that they'd given it a lot of thought. But I got defensive. I then got dismissive, and ultimately I kind of shut the conversation down. And what I realized was going on was I felt threatened, which is really weird, right? I'm working with a colleague, amazing idea, they're excited, they just wanted to share it with me, but I freaked out. And it was that amygdala, that little part of your brain that processes emotional responses, very quickly had flipped into fight or flight response. And of course, the person that I was working with felt completely shut down and horrible, and it really didn't go well for our relationship. What I realized through introspecting on this was that I felt threatened because I'd set my identity up and kind of my high standards and that imposter syndrome as I needed to have all the answers. Like, if somebody's coming to you with an idea you've not thought of, that was a threat. That's not how I want to work. I want to be able to embrace these things. I want to be able to have that curiosity mindset where we can work together and we can really build on ideas. So a really powerful tool that I want to share with you here, it's in the space of building self-awareness. And this is about starting to notice the emotions that are happening for you and starting to name them. So what I did was I designed them into a bit of a character. And I'd be like, oh, there's defensive Dan showing up, about to shut down that conversation. And when that happened, I could then catch myself and be like, oh, there's defensive Dan. For some reason, they live up here. And then I could start to interact with them and see what they were threatened about. And with that reframing, I can then shift my perspective. And there's a really cool neuroscience trick here from an amazing book called Positive Intelligence as well, that as you're reimagining that scenario, if you just gently get your fingers and thumbs and just rub them together ever so gently, so you can kind of feel like the fingerprints. If you do that every time that you catch yourself and do that reframe, what you're doing is you're slowly rewiring part of your brain so that over time, your response will naturally start to shift. Sounds crazy, but trust me, it works. So that was defensiveness and how my high standards were getting in the way of me interacting with other people. Let me tell you a third story about judgment. In this situation, I was working with a peer, and it was all online. So we had a lot of Zoom calls, Miro boards, a lot of great remote collaboration. And we're working on an internal initiative that we're both super excited about. It was to do with product management and people. So it's like a very meta about how part of the culture and how we wanted to shape it. The kind of stuff that I love doing. And we've been working on it for a few sessions and a few weeks. And I remember at the end of one particular session, I've been trying to share my perspective on something that we're thinking about. And on the way home, I remember feeling really frustrated. I was like, they don't get it. Like, I'm communicating clearly. I'm updating the board and I've got this great graphic that explains my ideas, but they don't get it. Like, what's wrong with them? And I realized I'd slipped into this perspective of like, I thought I was then better than this person. But what I noticed starting to happen in subsequent sessions after that was that because I'd internalized this mental model, it's kind of like this shortcut of how I viewed this person as them not understanding my ideas, that started to show up in really subtle and weird ways in our interactions together. And of course they can feel it. So it's a real light bulb moment for me that even when I was trying to be curious and ask open-ended questions and continue to put my ideas across in that call, because I had this deep-seated perception that I was now holding, that still showed up. And of course they can feel that. That's not how I want to be either. I want to be able to see that human and see all of the humanity and all of their strengths and the amazing things that they bring to the conversation. I wanted to give myself permission to have a beginner's mindset. What I learned here was a really powerful tool was I could use physical movement. What I started doing was every time I was about to go into one of these workshops, I'd spend 10 minutes and I'd just go for a quick walk around the block. And when I was doing that, I would focus on what was going on around me, but also all of the things that I really appreciated and that I was grateful for about working with this person. And over time, this got me into a different perspective. So that when I went to work with them, again, I was operating from a completely different place and some of that tension and that frustration was just gone. So that was a story about how you may not realize it, but you might have subtle perceptions towards people that getting in the way of how you show up for them as well. So my fourth story, I wanted to talk to you about self-care. What became really evident for me was actually all of these three things, kind of the feedback, the judgment, and the defensiveness, they were all built off each other, and they all showed up and interplayed with each other in weird and wonderful ways. And because I was always in this heightened state of like stressed and anxious and on edge and feeling defensive, meant that I was exhausted. I didn't sleep very well, I felt really burnt out, and I felt disconnected from the world ultimately. As I started to slow down and take more care of myself, as well as working on some of those other things that we just talked about, things really started to shift for me. And this isn't just about the things that you've all heard, like go for more exercise, eat healthier. For me, this was really about building a new routine. Now, this might sound really crazy, but I love it. And I actually get up 2 hours earlier every day than I need to, somewhere between 6 and 6:30. And those 2 hours are just for me. I'll get up, I'll go downstairs, I'll make a great cup of coffee, and I'll feed the cats. I'll come back to bed and I'll read for an hour, either fiction, non-fiction, depending on what mood I'm in, but I'll just start the day that way. Then I'll get up, get ready for the day, I'll do some journaling, and then I'll meditate, have breakfast, and I'm ready to go for the day. Investing in that 2 hours, in that routine, really sets me up. And by giving myself that space to recharge, changed the game for me completely. But one of the most powerful things that I did in that routine was practicing the art of gratitude. And this was something the coach I was working with at the time got me to do. And then I had to tell my partner one thing that I loved about myself every day. Now, that was really horrible at the beginning. It felt really cringe as well, because I was in this burnout place and I was exhausted and I was like, there's nothing good about me. Like, I don't love anything about me. Like, I'm not a fan of anything that's going on at the moment. But as I really pushed through that with some encouragement and started to work on it, it got easier and it got a bit more fun. And I've kept it up. And again, it's one of those really interesting tools that as you practice the art of gratitude, even if it's really small things like, that was a great cup of coffee, or I'm thankful for like my soft, comfy pillow, they start to change your perspective on things as well. So here, I would invite you to practice the art of gratitude. And every day for the next week, I'd like you to write down 3 things that you're grateful for. So let me just recap those stories for you. First one was about feedback. As leaders, it's really important that we're able to invite it in. So I'd like you to model that behavior by asking somebody for how you can show up better for them. Second one was around defensiveness and how we may be wearing a coat of armor and operating from a place of fight or flight without realizing it. So here, I would invite you to think about that character. Mine was defensive Dan, and spend some time reframing how you'd like to interact. Third one was around judgment. And this for me was how I got myself stuck in a perspective towards somebody that wasn't helpful. And that was impacting how I showed up with that person. Here, I would invite you to think about somebody that's important to you right now and just look into the perspective that you hold towards them and see how you can shift that. And then lastly was the self-care. So think about the routine, if that works for you, but mainly practice that art of gratitude. So I just want to leave you with a few things. The fact that you're here and that you are attending talks like this and you practice product management shows that you're already a great leader. We're all human, we're all going to make mistakes, and we're always learning. I'm still always learning, and I don't ever want to stop. I'm still a work in progress, and this is great. So I'd just like to leave you with one last quote that when I first heard it, really captured for me the essence of the journey that I've been on. And that's by somebody called Dr. Emily Anholt. And it goes like this: I'll look after me for you if you'll look after you for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ben. That was a great story. Again, really personal. Some strong takeaways that you shared with us around the importance of getting feedback, how you can really check in with yourself and understanding yourself. Really powerful. I wasn't going to mention it, but it did at first. But it did really make me think about the book I just published, which is called Managing product equals manage intention. And what I really taken away from your talk is how a lot of these tensions, rather than looking externally about the people we work with or the situations that you're faced with, I like how you bring it back to yourself without internalizing it, but really being constructive about it, and the tools that you shared in that respect. So thank you so much for that. And last but not least, we've got Catherine, who is a certified holistic leadership coach who focuses on cultivating inner leadership. So nice build on what Ben was just talking about. And she helps bring conscious intentionality, that's a good word, to executives and teams through management leadership training and her one-to-one coaching practice. She's worked with leaders and teams from the likes of Google, Facebook, Pinterest, IDEO, Nextdoor, GitHub, Blend, and various startups. Prior to that, she led various digital marketing and growth product management teams at Blue Apron, DigitalOcean, Fab.com, and Microsoft. Tonight, Catherine is going to talk to us about some of her learnings and tips about how to best cultivate psychological safety. Can I have a massive hand in the comments for Catherine, our third and final speaker for tonight?
Hello, everybody. So lovely to be here with you all today. And I won't do another breathing exercise like Akil did, but if you've been watching for a while now, maybe you need a little bit of an energy booster. So I encourage you to like shake it out or do what you need to do to just bring back some energy into your body. And today I want to talk about psychological safety. So years ago, I came across one of the largest studies run by Google. Many of you have likely heard of it. It was called Project Aristotle. And in it, they were studying the traits and qualities of what contributed to their highest performing teams. They studied 180 teams over 2 years and found that psychological safety was the #1 trait and indicator for their highest performing teams. And this finding goes hand in hand with the #1 dysfunction of many teams, an absence of trust. So what is psychological safety? And how can it help your teams? So I just want to start with the definition of it. Defined as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So it's an environment that leaders create where the people working on their team feel safe enough to raise their hands and say, hey, I made a mistake. Or, hey, I don't understand what I'm doing. Or, hey, I'm struggling at home and that's really affecting my work. Or, hey, I'm scared and I really need help. And being able to voice these concerns without any fear of humiliation or retribution. So when someone feels psychologically safe on their team, they're willing to take risks, willing to say that they screwed up. And they're willing to ask for help when they're in over their heads, without any fear of punishment, blame, or shame. In fact, someone that feels psychologically safe will say these things with absolute confidence that their boss or coworkers will rush in and be supportive of them. That's what a truly trusting team feels like. So when people feel safe and protected by leadership in their teams and organization, their natural reaction is to trust and cooperate. And without it, when people don't feel safe, it's a breeding ground for a toxic environment, a lot of pent-up fear. And that contributes to withholding, secrecy, covering up mistakes, not speaking up, people blaming each other, less cooperation, less trust, and less effective teams. So I want to share with you a few ways you can help contribute to a psychologically safe environment for your teams. Whether you're an individual contributor or leading a team, I want you to think about, as I go through these ways, what resonates with you, and reflect on what you're doing now and what do you want to do differently. Ultimately, I really believe that leaning into these traits can create trust and safety, the main bedrocks for a psychologically safe team. So the first one, around sharing your vulnerabilities, and even just seeing and hearing the word vulnerabilities. Just notice what your natural reaction is hearing and seeing that phrase. I know some people cringe at the sight of this word. And if that's you, notice that. Get curious about that. Sharing your own vulnerabilities and struggles is so important because when you share your own struggles, what you're really doing is you're giving permission for others to share theirs. You're helping someone feel that it's okay to struggle and that they won't be rejected or mocked and judged for dealing with a failure or feeling stupid about hitting a challenge. And what goes hand in hand with sharing your vulnerabilities is also admitting that you're fallible, that you make mistakes. By admitting and owning your mistakes, you're telling your team that it's okay to fail. Let your team know that you will miss things or you will make mistakes and that you can expect them to speak up and hold you accountable versus keeping quiet. So I think most people can intellectually understand why it's important to be vulnerable and acknowledge your fallibility. But what blocks us from leaning into this more? So I would argue it's a deep-seated, rooted, limiting belief. So it's a natural human tendency not to want to be rejected or to look bad in front of others. But I encourage you to dig deep to see what your own limiting beliefs are. A common one I hear is this one on the slide. The person has a belief that if I share my struggles and challenges, others will think less of me. They'll see me as weak. I won't get that promotion. Second part around this, asking yourself, is that really true? Think about examples that have happened in your life that prove otherwise. And then the third part around limiting beliefs is starting to cultivate a new belief that you want to cultivate instead. So one example being this one on the slide. If I share my struggles and challenges, it actually gives others permission to express theirs. It will strengthen our connection and build trust. Such a big difference in what these limiting beliefs and how they can control you and what a healthy belief could be and an unhealthy one could be. And exposing them and being aware of them can really be powerful. I really love this quote from Adam Grant about seeing trust as something you earn, not build. And a big determinant of that is your daily behaviors and actions. So asking yourself, are you impeccable with your word? Do you do what you say you're going to do? Are you a dependable and reliable leader? Are you benevolent and kind to others? Do you act out of integrity? All of these things help contribute to earning and continuing to earn trust with others. It's not something you just build and then you're done with. Goodbye. It's a continuous, repeated action. Another big part of building psychological safety is creating a supportive environment when mistakes are made. So looking at how you react and how your teams react to mistakes and failures. Is it something that is shamed or blamed and frowned upon? Or do you use it as an opportunity to learn and grow from? Are you coaching the one that makes the mistake? And even more importantly, one thing I really want to highlight here is that person leaving the conversation where they've just admitted their mistakes feeling empowered and inspired, or are they leaving that conversation feeling deflated and demotivated? That one's super, super important because I think how you handle their reactions, your reactions to their mistakes can make such a big difference in their feeling and how they react and feel empowered in their day-to-day. Yes, it's important to hold people accountable and let them know the impact their mistakes have on them, but it tends to be human nature to feel guilty already, knowing you made a mistake. So your job's not to harp on that guilt in most cases, but to help that person learn and grow and evolve from that mistake. Show them that you really care about their growth and evolution. Another piece that goes hand in hand is decreasing barriers for people to speak up. Maybe you have a team of more introverts. Maybe they're timid to speak up and share their voices. Maybe folks feel intimidated by other people in the room. And what you can do is to lean into your curiosity and not wait for people to speak up, but ask those open-ended questions to let more voices be heard. Share that there are massive uncertainties in what you're working on and that every voice is important. Don't have to wait for people to proactively speak up if you have more of a quiet team. Ask the hard questions, get that feedback. And the last point I want to make is around creating human-to-human connection. So we are humans. We are more than our work selves. We are multi-dimensional, complex humans with personal lives, thoughts, and feelings. And the more we can see that wholeness of the other humans we work with, the more connected we can feel to our colleagues. So we don't just decapitate our personal lives at work. It's there and brought into who we are. So proactively doing things that recognize the wholeness in everyone and see that humanity of us can be very, very connecting. And so a few ways on how to do this. So on your teams, some of my favorite ways, simple as icebreaker questions. Take a physical jar, put in some questions, pull out one as a surprise in team meetings to start it off. Similar that goes hand in hand with that is doing breakout room check-ins. So if you have a big team, 10, 15 people, use that Zoom breakout room feature, put people in pairs, ask them, give them a structure on how they should share with each other. I love using Rosebud Thorn, which is sharing one thing that went well this week, one thing that didn't go well, and one thing that they're looking forward to. Similar to sharing a highlight, a low light. One of my favorites, sharing something you're most proud of about yourself. We often don't take time to really explore like, hey, what am I really proud of? And sharing your best part of your week. Another one that I really enjoy is gauging the internal weather of participants. So adding a poll in Zoom, sharing, hey, if you were to map your internal weather to an emotion, your internal emotional state to a weather, what would that look like? Sunny, cloudy, rainy, stormy, cloudy with a chance of meatballs, rainbows and unicorns, whatever it is, just getting a sense of where people are at energetically in the room. Another couple, I think Akil mentioned these like shared workspace cultures. So things that can create social collisions, right? We used to, run into people at the getting coffee or a snack, but what's an equivalent we can create on Zoom, whether that's silent co-working Zooms, water cooler Zooms. There's a site called icebreaker.video, which I just tried out for the first time recently with some folks, and it's fun. You get into a group and they pair you up and you set the time limit, and there's really intentional questions that you can work through with your pair. So it's a fun, they have different themes of the questions. It's a fun way to get to interact with folks in a more unique way. And on the one-on-one front, some of my favorites are asking yourself, do you just dive into one-on-ones and start with the logistics and what needs to get done and what's happening? Or do you take a moment to really connect with that person, asking them, how are you feeling today, 0 to 10? What's most contributing to that score? What's most detracting from that score? Really showing empathy and care for the relationship, because that empathy and care and someone knowing that you're there for them goes such a long way on that front. So the top 6 things I want you to take away, or 5 things from today, is around how to cultivate psychological safety. So sharing your vulnerabilities, acknowledging your fallibility, getting deeper on what might be preventing you from doing so. What are your deep-seated limiting beliefs? Creating supportive environments for mistakes, really mining mistakes for what learnings they're presenting versus shaming someone. Decreasing barriers for people to speak up by asking questions and leaning in with genuine curiosity versus blame and defensiveness. And then really being intentional. That word's come up many times today. Being intentional about creating human-to-human connection within team meetings and one-on-ones. And so I'd love for everyone just to take 20 seconds to themselves and think about what's one commitment you want to make to cultivate a psychologically safe team. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd love for you to add them into the comments and share with everyone else, like one thing that you want to do to cultivate and make a psychologically safe team. Just take 20 seconds to do that right now. If you're watching after this is recorded live, maybe add it to the comments too, so folks can just pull in from all the wonderful ideas you guys have with each other. And I want to leave you with a quote that many of you have likely heard, but that just really sticks with me, and I love it so much, from Maya Angelou, around people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It's all about the feelings, winning people over emotionally, creating that psychologically safe environment. So my wish for you is that I hope you can be intentional about creating a psychologically safe team to create more joy, more aliveness in your day-to-day experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was, worthy closure of tonight's talks and the topic that we've been talking about, the soft skills. And I loved how you took that concept from psychological safety and given us some really good pointers on how and where to start. So really, really appreciate that. And I'm sure that was really helpful for all the people watching and listening tonight or afterwards. And this is the bit where we'll just go through some questions based on your talks. I would encourage everyone to leave some questions in the comments. I can't see any at the moment, but I'm sure they'll come through. What that means is that gives me a great starting point to ask my own questions, and maybe starting with you, Catherine, if that's all right. Because I wanted to play devil's advocate, because you talk about creating a supportive environment. But I can imagine there might be people on this, watching us tonight and listening to your points and thinking, we don't have time for that because we go from one deadline to the other. We have pressures. We've got lots of things, especially now where there's lots of uncertainty. We don't have time to even focus on creating a supportive environment because we're so focused on delivery and surviving.
Yeah. And I think the metaphor that's coming up for me is, which kind of, I'll show you how it's linked, but the metaphor that's coming up is the story around you can cut a tree with a dull axe for 3 hours, or you can sharpen the axe for 2.5 hours and cut it down in 30 minutes. And for me, that just speaks to kind of this point of taking a step back in order to taking one step back to move 2 or 3 steps forward, right? Being intentional to zoom out. We're fish in the water swimming, and sometimes we don't even see that water. And there's like little things we can do where there's an upfront investment, but it really pays off. Going back to teaching a man to fish versus just fishing for him. And so that's the piece it's breaking the momentum. And so it is intentionally taking yourself off the comfortable go path, but doing it can be super powerful.
Thank you, Catherine. And maybe building on that question for Ben, because I liked how you talked about, that focus on that inner self. But how do you, especially if you haven't necessarily done that before, and as Catherine said, it's go, 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 that's our state of mind, and that's our modus operandi. How do you carve out the time to focus on your inner self? Where do you start?
Yeah, great question. Make it as easy as possible. You don't need to go straight to hard mode. You don't have to go straight to the 2-hour kind of morning routine that I talked about, for example. Just build in 5 minutes. Like if you can get to your desk 5 minutes earlier and you spend that 5 minutes just journaling or perhaps just looking out the window as you finish your coffee or something, Just start building in small things like that. And this is like the power of compounding. Like if you start doing these things continually and then just up the ante and introduce something else, over time, you'll be getting all of these benefits without realizing it. And when you eke it up like that, kind of incrementally, like we love doing as product managers, like small steps, that's what will get you there.
Amazing, thank you. And Catherine, I can see a question from Thomas, which other people in the comments have already started answering, but it'd be good to get your thoughts on Thomas's question, where he's saying, do you have any advice on how you can determine how psychologically safe a team is?
Yeah. I think actually Ian responded using Amy Edmondson's survey. She's done a ton of work on psychological safety. I actually haven't seen that survey, but I'd be curious to look at it. The first thing that came to mind was doing some sort of survey. So it's like doing an anonymous survey to folks on your team, asking questions like, from a scale of 0 to 10, how comfortable are you sharing mistakes with others? And what's one thing, and then an open-ended question like one thing that's contributing, what's one thing that's most contributing to that score? And maybe there's like a few other variations of that, but I love having a scale to get people to mark a number. And then what's really important though is the qualitative feedback, because everyone's scale is a little different. So anchoring people to a number and then asking them kind of what's most contributing to that. But I think, Amy Edmondson would be curious to see what that one's about too. Some sort of survey, anonymous survey.
Nice.
Mark,
cool.
may I add something else on that as well?
Of course.
I love all of the things Catherine's just said. They resonate really strongly with me. Something else I've observed is pay attention to things like retros as well. Like if you're seeing that there is less things in there like, hey, could we talk about this column? And everybody's eking towards like the good column. I always find that to be an interesting indicator as well, because perhaps you have had a good week, but if that's a pattern, perhaps people just aren't comfortable sharing and discussing as a team.
Yeah, no, really good shout.
One thing I want to add to that is the concept, I think Ben just talked about postmortem, and there's a concept of a pre-mortem. So if this project fails, like what went wrong, and having everyone in advance talk about and bring up all of the things that could have gone wrong, assuming it did go wrong. So it's a way to get people to think about their concerns ahead of time and voice them. But I just love the concept of pre-mortems as well.
Yeah, cool. I was going to say just really quickly before, I get thrown out of this chat, but I was going to refer to my book again. I talk a lot about things like pre-mortem, because that is a way of, in a safe space, airing those things, right? And creating a conversation around that. Because Ali is raising a question, maybe for you, Catherine, is like, if people don't feel psychologically safe, will they answer a survey honestly?
Yeah, it's a great question. My first thoughts are, I think, having it come from a neutral third party, right? If there's someone that might be contentious in the organization and people have a mistrust towards that person who is administering it, maybe trying to bring someone else who has that neutrality, and for them to be like, hey, this truly is anonymous, could be a helpful place to start. And then maybe too, it's bringing in a third party to have one-on-one interviews with folks, right? Maybe a survey isn't the right way to go, but maybe you bring someone in to be like, hey, I know we have some issues on our team. I really want to get to the bottom of this. And so would love for folks to have these anonymous 30-minute, 45-minute interviews with someone. And so we can see kind of what's going on and what we can do to improve on that front. Are a couple of thoughts coming up for me.
Thank you. And it's interesting because we've got Ian, he's asking a question around that, which I'm going to extend, if that's okay, so that you both can, Catherine and Ben, cover this question. But Ian is asking, any thoughts on how to encourage psychological safety upwards in an organization? So I guess from the top, buy into that idea of creating that psychologically safe environment. But I would like to extend it a little bit, is because I've heard some horror stories. Luckily, I've never been in those organizations where people say, yeah, soft skills and psychological safety. And Ben, what did you talk about again? Inner whatever? No, we're here to deliver. We're here to hit the bottom line. Again, how do you influence in a way that people do start taking the importance of soft skills, of psychological safety seriously? And maybe I'll start with you, Ben, if that's okay.
That's a fantastic question. A few thoughts. My first reaction, kind of, I guess, more of my coach hat on, was I'd be really curious about what's going on for that person that you're working for that's having that reaction, and demonstrate a lot of the things that all of us have talked about this evening. So that curiosity, that compassion, and get really empathetic towards them as well. Try and understand what perspective they're coming at this from. That would be one way. Might be a little bit more daunting to engage in a conversation like that. But I think I always come back to modeling behavior. Like, how we all act is what's going to rub off on other people. So I believe that if you started to being a bit more vulnerable with that person and started surfacing more of the wins that you've had as a team, where you have that high trust environment, then over time, I'd hope that their perspective would start to shift as well.
Thank you, Ben. Any thoughts from your perspective, your experience, because you work obviously a lot, Catherine, with teams and leadership teams on these things?
One thing I just want to acknowledge, first of all, is that it's hard, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes leadership does dictate downwards how safe an environment is, and to some extent, until that person really feels the effects of it and realizes that it's a place that they want to grow and develop, sometimes it's hard to get forward momentum. So that's just one thing I want to acknowledge, that sometimes it sometimes feels like a really daunting task to try to convince someone of something that they don't fully believe in themselves yet. It's like what I always say about coaching. You can't just tell someone they need coaching. They have to want it for any change to happen. So one thing there I want to acknowledge. And then the second part is around just how you can offer that feedback to that person and focus a lot on the impact it's making, breaking it down. So instead of being like, hey, I don't think we have a psychologically safe environment, right? Like breaking down the components, like what psychological safety is such like a big topic. There's so many different aspects of it. And maybe just honing in on like, hey, like I'm noticing, these two members of the team don't really speak up at our team meetings. And the impact of that is that we really like lose out on some great ideas in these meetings. And so I just wanted to bring that up to your attention and figure out how we can collaborate and have those voices heard. And I'm obviously paraphrasing what this conversation could be like, but focusing on a specific impact you're noticing that person might care about and working backwards from there.
Thank you. And I'm conscious of time, so I'd say probably have time for 2-3 more questions. So now is an opportunity. If there's any more questions, please drop them in the comments. But in the absence of any questions that I can see on my right-hand side, I want to ask both of you a question, which is around trust, because we talked, and Akila as well, about building trust, trusted relationships, generating trust. Give me just an example of what you've seen or experienced of how you can break trust, particularly in a product or team context.
The biggest one that's just coming for me, and I think I mentioned this in my presentation, is not being integrity with your word. So it's one of I actually drew it from like the 4 agreements, if you've heard of it. One of the agreements is like being impeccable with your word. And I think when you say you're going to do something, and it's easy to be like, oh yeah, we'll get it done this week, or yeah, like we can definitely include that in this sprint cycle. And then it falls off, but you don't follow up with that person. And they're kind of like, WTF, why is this not in here? It's those like subtle little things that start to add up over time that I think what I've seen has been quite toxic. It's less of the overt and more of these subtle ways.
And Ben?
I completely agree that integrity, like trust, is so easy to lose. And being true to your word, yeah. But holding yourself accountable as well. I think there's something else you can mirror that behavior. You can model that behavior for everybody else. So being open in a meeting as well. Be like, hey, I said last week I was going to do that thing and I haven't. No excuses. That's on me. It's going to be hard to rebuild that trust. But yeah, integrity, the 4 Agreements is a great book. So yeah, little steps like that will slowly regain it.
Excellent. I can't see any new questions coming through, which is fine. Because again, I would love to leave people tonight with just maybe one thought to sum it up. And the question I have for you is, what would you have said to younger selves, and also taking into account that both your younger selves were product managers. Ben, you still are, but Catherine, I know you were also involved in the product side of things. In terms of what's the, in terms of soft skills, would there be a skill that you say to your younger self, focus on that soft skill first and you'll go far?
I think just the quick lead into that would be, the thing that's always fascinated me is, as product managers, we are so comfortable with uncertainty. We know how to navigate that. But as humans, we hate uncertainty. We want control. So I'm going to be practicing that reframing, that like if you're getting anxious or stressed about something, just write it down and put it in perspective and be like, it'll be okay. What can I learn from this?
Amazing. Catherine?
Love that. The one that immediately came to mind that I think's the bedrock of just being a leader is really practicing empathetic listening and powerful questioning. So specifically around empathetic listening, becoming familiar with the 3 levels of listening, and specifically around there, noticing nonverbals, right? We oftentimes focus in on words and what people are saying, but we don't spend enough emphasis noticing body language, tone, energy, and then reflecting back to others, validating their feelings, and then getting curious and asking open-ended questions that aren't trying to lead you to your own answer, but being genuinely curious about what comes out of there. So empathetic listening and powerful questioning.
Thank you. And on that note, thank you both, and Akhil as well, for your amazing talks tonight, and the way in which you just answered all the questions. Really appreciate it. Again, I'd be grateful. I'm going to start, and I'm sure there'll be more claps coming through in the comments. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Sean just to wrap things up.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes, sorry, small technical problem. Yeah, thank you so much to our incredible speakers today, and also to Mark for expertly curating this. And thank you all for joining and kind of making it in, even though Meetup is trying its best to stop you. We have, as I said, we have one more event this year. It's going to be on December 9th. We have sent out the invite, so do check Meetup in a couple of days. And we really look forward to seeing you all then. And a massive hand to our speakers, and thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.